Thank you for tuning in, everybody. I'm back. I'm Sebastian from Neurodiversity News, and this is Erin Pyper. And
Oh,
we just wanted to do a little collab video and talk to you guys about our backgrounds and our views on channels such as Fathering Autism and the BHARE Foundation, Autism Speaks. Could you start, Erin?
sure. So, hi everyone. I'm Erin Piper. I am a college student at attending Florida Atlantic University, and I am majoring in social work because I want to become a disability social worker so that I can make sure that the disability population is treated equally like everybody else, make sure they're protected from exploitation that we'll definitely cover on later in the collab. And another thing, I am an autistic triplet. I have two siblings who are also on the spectrum and they don't talk as much as me. And I'm vegetarian for the environment for the animals. And I love chocolate. So a little more about me.
And with me, I am a journalist. I'm a full-time journalist, and that's kind of why I haven't been on my channel a long time because all of my time has been focused on that because it's a lot of work. I had no idea, and I'm really liking it. And I'm autistic and was diagnosed when I was 10, and I got into the neurodiversity movement after a very tense argument with my stepmom who said that I should have been cured, and
What?
that led me down the and that led me down the rabbit hole to figure out like what all other autistic people besides myself were like because I was dating someone who was also autistic and she had higher needs than I did and I didn't know how to help her, and I eventually left because I just had a lot of trouble taking care of myself, and so I was looking into other autistic people and their needs and what they're like, and that's when I came across the neurodiversity movement, and I made it my mission to amplify the voices of other autistic people as well as share my own stories and to make the world a better place for autistic people for both through my writing and through my videos.
I am so proud of you. I support you through and through. I'm glad you're a journalist. I'm really glad about your journey. I got diagnosed with autism at around 2.5 years old. At the same time, my siblings got diagnosed, and my parents never gave up on me. They were really nice. They never believed that I should have a cure. My parents accepted us for the way we were, but I'm really disgusted to see people wanting a cure for for autistic people. So I'm really glad we're touching onto that.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's something not that many autistic YouTubers talk about, and it's like that elephant in the room that a lot of parents I notice don't want to mention those things, but I think it should be talked about in a way where we could come to like a consensus because I personally don't believe in it. There are some who do. I mean, I can't really tell them what to think or what their beliefs are, but I'm going to just be firm on my stance. I think the world would be a much better place if we were accommodated and accepted for who we are. And that's not to
Exactly.
say that it won't. I think there should be cures for certain medical issues that many autistic people face, such as seizures, GI issues, and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I have friends with all those things, and all of them would like those things cured. And I agree, they're very painful and horrible, and sometimes lead to death. So I think scientists need to start looking into those things rather than curing autism itself, because autism is very complex. It's a neurotype. It's the way you're born. It's no it's no less natural than being neurotypical is. And you surely can't cure that, I would imagine, unless we were in the year 3500 or whatever. But if you can't cure that, then you can't cure autism either. And that's just the way it is and the way it's got to be. At some point, society is going to have to adapt and learn to
Exactly.
understand the way we are.
Oh, yeah. I couldn't agree more because I'm also somebody who advocates for change. I advocate for not only disability equality, but also gender equality and economic equality. Like, I'm very supportive of those kind of beliefs.
Absolutely, me too. I think all those things really tie into autism too, because they're just intersecting identities. Like, there's a lot of LGBTQ people in the community. I've read somewhere that around 70% do not identify as heterosexual, And so that needs to definitely be included, as well as, Black autistics and Hispanic autistics
Yes.
and um and other disabilities too, like the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and
Right.
cerebral palsy and things like that.
Right.
So yeah, all those things tie into it, and autism, at least for us, is kind of at the center of all that.
Yes. And because if you don't know already, I am half Colombian because my mom's from Colombia and I'm a woman. So
Yeah, exactly. So you have those intersections. Since I'm a white
right.
male and I am pansexual, so that ties into the LGBTQ. But yeah, all many of us have a lot of intersections, and I think you got to kill two birds with one stone, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah. So, did you want to touch on fathering autism?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's something that I am very passionate about because it hits very close to home.
In what way?
Well, like I said, I have two siblings who don't talk as much as me. They're autistic, and I just imagine how they feel if they were to be in Abby's situation. And that's why it hits me hard.
Yeah, I could understand that. Like, would you be able to say in what ways they do share with Abby in ways that are, not too personal, of course?
Wait, I'm sorry?
I said, would you be able to say like the similarities they may share with Abby, as long as it's not too
Yes.
personal?
Yes. So like they both don't really talk much. They both go to an autism school. They're all introverted.
Yeah, I feel that. I kind of have some experience with people like that myself because, as we talked about before, I was a caregiver for high support needs autistic people, a direct support professional, they call it, or DSP. That's basically where we try to help high support needs people become independent and to try to get them to be as autonomous as possible. But I worked with teenagers, so it was a little bit different than in the adult program. And all these kids went through ABA in some form or another, which we didn't have to do ABA on them personally, but you had to like witness it, and it was very hard. And like, it's
Oof.
not the ABA that you see in like those famous videos where the kids are getting slapped and shocked. It's none of that, none of that. And there's no punishments either. I put that in air quotes because they're not being punished per se, but they don't get to access the things they want if they don't comply, which in a way is punishment. And it
Right.
was very hard because I would witness a lot of like meltdowns and outbursts from the clients
Right.
because they were denied, being able to do things like saying going out to get coffee and
Oh
stuff like that.
no.
They wouldn't be
That's
allowed to
not
do
good.
that. Yeah, like they had to do two chores, a different chore every day, and they had to shower, of course, which like those things are good. Like, being able to do things around the house if you're able and to keep yourself clean, those things are important. But I don't think it should be like forced upon them. Sometimes if they have executive
Exactly.
functioning issues, it's just
Right.
hard to do and they just don't have the mental energy. But say going out to the mall or something will give them that little bit of confidence boost and make them feel good and maybe compel them to shower. Like, of course, every kid's different, but I feel like being able to do things that they want to do keeps them very regulated and happy. And I think that
Exactly.
should be the goal above all else. But the company I was working with, they were more concerned about forcing them to basically adapt to society.
Hey. Oh my lord. That's not
Yeah.
good.
And
Um, yeah. And you know that video about that Fathering Autism made? It's called Mad but Doing It Anyways. They had Abigail do the dishes and she was made into doing it and they videotaped that moment. And I saw that video. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, okay, I understand she needs to have life skills, but you shouldn't force it on her and film it for the whole world to see, especially when creeps have access to to those kind of videos.
oh yeah, I was actually watching that Dad Challenge podcast earlier, and he was showing some fans of hers who were beyond creepy, and
Oh
one even
yeah.
admitting like like fantasies. I don't want to go into those
Yeah, me neither.
fantasies, but
Oh god.
it's very scary. And like Asa doesn't do anything about it because the Dad Challenge podcast reached out to Asa and Asa didn't say anything. And they keep in contact sometimes, although, they're kind of enemies, but you know, it's a bit of a soft rivalry, I suppose. But the fact
Oof.
Asa didn't answer that, I think kind of speaks volumes, especially if they're taking her out to those conventions. And those
Exactly.
guys could very well just run in and, do something with her. Of course, she'll have her entourage with her, but hey, there could be a nut job out there who could, do something bad.
Exactly. And it's even scarier because they know where Abby goes to school, according to the Dad Challenge podcast, and where she lives. And it's really scary. And I am also creeped out by the fans to where I ended up having panic attacks over it and I couldn't breathe. And I and if I was Ace and Priscilla and these fans were getting near my brother and sister, I would have called the cops and I would have made sure they were away from them. That's what I would have done.
Absolutely. I think that's something any sensible parent would do. You would think since she's their cash cow, they would want to, I don't know, protect her better, but that's just me.
Yeah. And like in response to Fathering Autism parading Abby to these meet and greets and being forced to hug and kiss, I wrote this poem called A Disaster Circus Tour. And I basically wrote like a parody of the Mouse family, a parody of Fathering Autism. And I also did a video on the poem, like elaborating on how scary the interactions would be and what Abby would have felt.
Yeah. Could you go into detail about it? Like maybe a verse or two you can recall?
Sure, I could definitely read it. So
Okay.
hold on, just 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, so a disaster circus tour. So I'll read a couple of them. On the action-packed day of VideoCon, many fans chose to see their favorite YouTubers, from food bloggers to filmmakers. As fans met their YouTube idols, energetic music produced loud beats with a positive sounding harmony. To the fans, the VideoCon felt like a loud, vibrant party. While fans visited their favorite stars, multiple fans came to visit a channel called Confessions of an Autism Family. The Mac family had a discussion on how to promote themselves as an inspirational family. The Mac family consisted of Father Keith, a former mechanic turned vlogger, Mother Jessica, who pursues a goal in creating an MLM skincare company, Superstar Elijah, who excels athletically and academically, and their autistic daughter, Emily Grace. In the Mac family's eyes, Emily Grace was a marketing tool for autism awareness. According to them, they intended to spread a positive message on living with severe autism. However, their intentions cross the line between education and exploitation. In their daily videos, they often showcased Emily Grace as an example of living with autism. Emily Grace, however, did not feel comfortable. She often squirmed and brushed a shiny black camera away from her, but the Mac family kept shoving the camera close to her face. But Emily Grace used her goodbye wave to escape the everlasting torture of being paraded on YouTube. So that's a little snippet of it.
It's really powerful and really puts you into her shoes and to understand how uncomfortable it could be. We'll never really know for sure unless if we're her, but there's so many pictures of her with fans that the Dad Challenge podcast showed where she's clearly unhappy and does not want to be there. And Asa argued, well, we just want to make her normal. At the end of the day, fuck normal, man. Fuck normal.
Yeah,
Because
definitely.
the idea of normal came about, I think, by a few people who acted a certain way, and they thought everybody should act the same way. And that's just not reality. That's just not how people are. In people's personal lives, everybody is so different, and their individuality needs to be respected. And that goes for any disabled person or whatever they are.
I
And it's just disgusting trying to force conformity. Like, remember that video, I Am an Autism Parent, that they did? And
yes, I
he
saw
said
that
he
video.
wants to make her, Oh yeah, go on.
I did see that video, and let me tell you, it was very awful. Asa seemed very he seemed to have no emotion, and he treated like autism as if Abby just lost her life or something. It was like a shadow. And I'm like, oh my lord, Asa, do you
I
really love
know.
your kid or not?
Yeah, and he has so much double speak in the video. Like he's saying that this is the way she is, and I love it, but I also hate it. And well, which one is it? Do you love it or do you hate it? You can't have both.
Yeah.
That's not how the world works. You either accept it or you don't.
Oh,
And what?
speaking of which, there was this video called Consent and Meltdowns, and Asa said stuff about how Abby had a meltdown not because there were cameras on her, but at the same time, he also said that he records Abby when she has meltdowns. So what exactly is he trying to get at?
Yeah. And as the Dad Challenge podcast said, like if you're a fan of the channel and you're educated by it, what are you really getting out of it? How does it make
Yeah,
you as a person better? What do you gain from it? Like understanding the autism, like what is your ultimate end goal? And I think much of it is this is just my feelings based on the way I've been treated in life. I think they do it because they want to feel better about themselves. They want
yeah,
themselves to
exactly.
feel like they're doing some kind of good deed, and they see
Right,
disabled people as something that's not like them, like othering them, and therefore
ugh,
by learning about this other, that is therefore making them better. Which
right,
this is not a reflection of everyone. I think everyone has their own different feelings about it, but I think for a lot of neurotypicals that I've met, including my own cousin, they just want to feel better about themselves. But there are better
right,
ways to do that, like listen
right,
to autistic people, go and volunteer, help a high support needs person, try to do some respite care, that kind of a thing. If you really want to understand autistic people at the highest level possible, it's going to take a little bit of effort. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. If you really do care about us as a population, you got to make a little bit of an effort. Is basically
exactly. Oh, and let's not forget about the time Fathering Autism filmed Abigail sitting on the toilet and doing her bathroom routine. And Asa says the first thing she does is pull her bottoms down as a sensory thing. I'm like, oh my lord, that is disgusting. Like, why would you say that in front of your kid and then you film it for the whole world to see?
yeah, it's disgusting. The fact he has no idea why it's bad also says a lot about him. Or on the flip side, he knows it's bad, but he knows he's going to get away with it, and he knows he's going to get admiration because he clearly is a very self-absorbed person.
He is. And, let's also not forget about the time that they filmed meltdowns at a hockey game. They filmed meltdowns in Walmart before all this happened. And then they also talked about diarrhea on a boat. Ugh.
Oh my god. Yeah, I heard about that too, and I just don't get it. Like, I don't understand the benefit of it. Like showing the reality of autism. Well,
Yeah.
you could write it. Here's one alternative. You could write about it and make it anonymous. So at least
Right.
people
Exactly.
can learn from it because I don't think just completely hiding it is good either. But you at least put it out there and people can be educated, but you don't have to reveal who you are and your identity. And your child could still be protected because at least their personal story is not out there in the world. I think
Right.
autism awareness is good to an extent in that people should be educated and understand what we're like, but it should not be at the expense of our dignity. That is where the
Right.
line needs to be drawn.
And then CPS has been called on fathering autism both times, and they got away with it both times. And here's what my social work professor told me. Just know my social work professor is also a licensed social worker, and she said it's because there are not a lot of resources on child exploitation. And she's actually disgusted with how fathering autism treated Abby. What I told you about how I tell my social work class of how Abby's treated. They were all disgusted.
I know, I remember. It needs to be, yeah, that needs to be spread more. I feel like in the online autistic community, a lot of people don't want to talk about it because they feel like it's futile and that it won't work. But I kind of think the opposite. I think the more you talk about it, the more you expose them, that gives them more bad press, and it'll be a lot harder for them to hide. Right now, it's very easy for them to hide because a lot are justifiably scared to speak out against them. But
Well,
you
I'm
know,
not.
neither am I. We're kind of outliers, and then a couple other YouTubers that I don't want to bring attention to them. Like
Me neither.
we'll
No.
take the brunt for now, but
Yeah. Yeah. We can do that.
yeah, like anyway, I really I really hope for the best for Abby as she
Same.
gets older.
I
Because
agree.
yeah, she's got 2 more years to go. I think she's 16 now, and she'll
Yeah,
be
she is 16.
yeah. So they're trying to get guardianship over her, and oh
Oh,
yeah, that's a whole other can of worms that
yeah.
needs to be altered a little bit. I think to a degree, it can be okay if they just have no way of making decisions. But I think the greater route should be alternative decision making. That should be the first route above
Right.
anything else. Because I think you can teach any human being to be able to say yes or no in some way. That in itself is self advocacy, being able to say
Right.
yes or no. And Abby understands English because if they tell her to
She
close the
does.
door or something like that, she knows how to close it. She understands commands. So she could also understand yes or no if they taught her, but they don't. Because if you notice, she doesn't have a no camera button on her iPad to communicate. Because you know what would happen if she did? Then that would give her autonomy. And then guess what?
Right.
No more money for them. No more mansions, no more
Good.
boats, no more cars, no
No.
more trips to the Bahamas or wherever they go during COVID of all times. And yeah, they'd be screwed because without her, they wouldn't have a platform. They wouldn't have what they have. And they say that they're putting all that money towards her future. But if that's the case, why are they spending it on so many trips and all those possessions?
Yeah. Where they could spend it on treatment services and they could spend it on social services that Abby could benefit from. And that's what I really wish could happen. And I say this as a social work student. And basically, Fathering Autism, like the parents really benefit the most from the channel because they get all of this money. And it's so important because if they get more money and they have more of a voice, then they're going to make it hard for people to access evidence. So they'll probably get away with it. I'm kind of questioning since they made some of the videos to private. I was like, are they really tampering with evidence?
Yeah, it's definitely suspicious, especially since it's been up for years. They probably realize that people are starting to catch on and that it's getting harder to hide. Because a lot of these family vloggers may eventually crumble, just like an empire, if you really think about
Right.
it. Because that's what it is.
Right.
It's an empire, and no empire lasts forever.
Right. And let's not, and like how Fathering Autism does MLMs, like Priscilla does MLMs and uses Diet Challenge podcast and CC Suarez, they both cover Abby being using no Abby being used to recruit people, and it's absolutely sickening, and it really disgusts me. I also did a video covering MLMs and how predatory they are.
Yeah, you would know a lot more about that than me. I never researched them that much, aside from watching a few minutes of like the Illuminati, her video on it. But that's the
Right.
extent. I think we should probably mention Summer while we're on the topic.
Oh, Summer. Oh, I know about her too because I know she is marketed as Abby's friend, and there are pictures of like Summer like holding Abby in place, and she wants to do ABA therapy. And as much as I do have a little more sympathy for her since she was a kid at the time, but she should not be, marketing off of Abby either. So I kind of that's how I really feel.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of my days as a DSP. Like sometimes we would have to hold the kids in place for pictures. I wouldn't do it. I would refuse. The others would do it,
Me too.
and,
I
and
would.
it's still and it still kind of pissed me off. They baby talk her, and it
Oh god,
makes me
Priscilla
very
does that too.
I know. She talks to her like her dog, and it's sickening because if my
Yeah,
parents talk like that, I'd be pretty furious.
me
And
too.
and I think even just treating her like a child in general, not allowing her to have
Yeah,
choices, that is also another issue that I think needs to be talked about because
right.
yeah, it how is she going to be independent later on in life? Like they want her to be so independent, but if they're not allowing her to make choices, then how's that going to happen?
Yeah, I kind of feel like Fathering Autism's logic is really illogical. I feel like they don't make sense.
Yes, definitely. We are a very logical bunch, and I do agree.
Yes, we are.
It is not logical.
It's not.
Um, I would like to.
Uh, yeah.
I would like to transition to the BHARE Foundation.
Oh yeah, I definitely like to talk about them as well because I also covered them. And basically, the father in charge of it, Bram, he wants to cure autism because he states that 2/3 of autistic people have IDD. They have 50% have GI issues, and they say that the average life expectancy is 36. But he's missing some of the other things that he should take into account, like um, economic barriers and poverty and employment opportunities, limited opportunities to healthcare, which can decrease their likelihood to live longer, and a lack of education in some countries. Because imagine, like, if there's somebody who has to travel so far to go to school and they have a disability and it's inaccessible because it's so far to travel from home to school, if it's so inaccessible in different parts of the world, and because of that they're not able to learn critical thinking skills, and because of that they're not able to have the skills to get a job, hence their likelihood to live a longer time is lower, and that's really the point of it.
Exactly. And that age, the reason they die so young is a lot of it is from seizures and suicide.
Yeah, and
And he
drowning.
fails, yeah, that too. He fails to mention those things because then that would detract from his narrative. And yeah, that would be good for him. And yeah, the drowning thing, that's a big thing too that I think we should touch on for high support needs people. That's why I think swimming
Yes.
lessons should be implemented very early in life because
Oh yeah.
there are those autistic people who many of them with intellectual disabilities, they will wander and elope and they will unfortunately end up in a body of water. And
That's not good.
I know, and that's why I think swim lessons should be implemented very early.
Oh, I agree. Another thing that I wanted to touch on about the Bear Foundation is that Bram actually promotes marijuana use in autistic people because he says it alleviates symptoms of sleep problems, anxiety. But I'm like, he, I looked at his LinkedIn, and the highest education experience he got was a bachelor's degree in biology. However, he does have CPR experience, but still, he's not a doctor. He doesn't have a master's. He doesn't have like a PhD. He never went to med school. So I'm like, honey, I'm like, Bram, why would you promote all this crap when you're not a doctor?
Oh, he's not the only parent that does that. Like, especially in the 90s and the early 2000s, a lot of parents who have no scientific background have tried to play doctor and usually ends in very disastrous results. And yeah,
Very.
there actually is a whole cabal of parents that do use cannabis on their kids as like a medication, which is bad. Like, look, since cannabis is legal in many states, if they're an adult and they consent to using it, more power to them. But if they're underage, that will affect the developing brain because it is, a drug at the end of the day. And
Right.
it's just not good for when their brains grow and develop. So it's really not worth it. It may curb
It,
the meltdown, sure, but
yeah.
would you want your child to just be brain dead when they're adults? You
Or
know?
have psychotic, or like have psychosis, like hallucinations, because drugs such as marijuana can enhance psychotic symptoms and hallucinations. And they also, a study actually talked about how it worsened kidney problems. And I'm like Bram should have never mentioned it. Also, what Bram did was film his kid having a seizure with strobe lights. But on the other hand, he has provided useful information on seizures because he has CPR experience. He was worked as a CPR trainer. He worked as a paramedic. However, he shouldn't have to film his kid having a seizure. And Brenner is 26 years old. He's nonverbal. He has high support needs.
Yeah, about the cannabis, like it can affect them like psychologically, like the hallucinations and psychosis you were
Right.
talking about, but that's only for like a small subset. It does not affect
Right.
everyone that way. But I think if you do it so young, the amount of negative side effects can increase as they get older, I would think. That I'm not a doctor, but I think the way it affects brain development, it can cause more issues than it does benefits if you do it so young.
Exactly. And I am really disgusted. Some people have to promote misinformation about autism treatments and wanting to seek a cure. I'm like, oh my lord, it's absolutely disgusting that people have to use their time to promote cures and all that nonsense. And that's all I have to say. That's the biggest takeaway. As I say this as a social work student, and I feel like it's an obligation for me to call out misinformation, call out problematic people.
Definitely, because somebody's got to do it, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And, as we talked about before, curing certain medical ailments such as seizures and GI issues and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I definitely back that up 100%. But autism is part of who we are. We would not be
Right,
who we are if we weren't autistic. And to
right,
take that away
exactly.
would be robbing us of our identity. And even for those who are high support needs, because
Correct.
when they make their vocal stems, they jump around and flap. For me personally, I feel joy when I see other autistic people being able to do that openly and comfortably. It it makes me feel like I'm with other people like me, other people who are not afraid of being themselves. And to take that away and just make them a boring neurotypical,
Yeah, I
that would
agree.
rob them of so much. And I
I
would
agree.
not yeah, I could not fathom a world without people like that, no matter how high or low their support needs are. I just can't picture a world without them. And whatever work I do, I want to try to prevent such a future from taking place that would take those things away.
Right. And I'm so glad we're actually touching onto that. Do you want to move on to the next topic?
Yeah, because I think Autism Speaks makes up a lot of what we already talked about before, especially in their early days when Cure was all the things they talked about back when they were collaborating with Jenny McCarthy, among
Oh,
others.
Jesus. Uh, and they all, even worse, Autism Speaks promoted fear-filled tactics, like promoting documentaries and ads such as "I am autism," and they portrayed autism as if it was a menace, and that's not. Autism is not a menace. Autism is who we are, and for people to portray it like that is encouraging ableism and stigma towards the disability community.
Absolutely. It makes us out to be like some kind of boogeyman that the public needs to be afraid of.
Yeah,
Because granted,
right,
this was not like shown at some kind of private showing. This was broadcast on televisions across the country. Think about the
right,
kind of impact that can have. Because when people hear the word autism, that's what they think of. They think of a child who's isolated, banging their heads, or whatever it is that they think
right,
autistic people do. And it just makes people afraid for reasons they don't need to be. And I think I worded it wrongly. Like there are some who do bang their heads, but they have pretty good reasons for doing so, especially in my experience as a DSP. I could go into one example. When my first day in the field, I was at a group home and there was a kid who was very minimally speaking, and it was part of his morning routine. And there were like three clients in this house, and there was like about five staff, including me, I believe. And we were trying to get this one client. into the bathroom to brush his teeth. And there were like other people in the hallway blocking the way. And it was very loud as the other clients. And he clearly was overstimulated and had enough. And he wanted to just get the teeth brushing over with because I would imagine he hates the way it feels. And he dropped to the floor, hitting himself in the head. And we had to get a helmet on him and get him into his room, which his bedroom was all padded. And we had to use block pads and put helmets on ourselves to protect ourselves and him. And now when you're in a moment like that, it can feel a little bit scary at first, but understand that it's not you having the tough time, it's them having the tough time. And
Exactly.
you got to do what you can to try to prevent those moments from happening. What could have been done better was to clear that hallway and just get him into the bathroom as fast as possible and get it over with. Because he clearly just wanted to get it over with so he could eat some breakfast. He was hungry. So you got to take those things into account. Sometimes those little details you need to keep track of.
Right.
And I think those are the types of people that Autism Speaks is talking about in I Am Autism and Autism Every Day and Sounding the Alarm, all those videos. Because, when a common person sees stuff like that, they won't know what to make of it. That's understandable to feel, but we got to normalize those things and make it so those things happen, but it's okay. Like, we gotta try to make their lives as comfortable as possible without trying to force them into a mold and try to change who they are. Because meltdowns, they are a part of us. I have my own meltdowns where I hit myself in the head. It hurts, it sucks, and I don't like it, but there are also upsides to it too. Like, I wouldn't have my analytical mind that I would without it, and I wouldn't be able to see through people's bullshit without it. And there's a trade-off, even for high support needs people. Like the kid who I was talking about before, he is amazing at puzzles, way better than I could ever be at puzzles.
I'm not good at puzzles.
Yeah. And he also, can read the subtitles in movies. So he could clearly read, but they haven't made him write. And they don't let him use an iPad, which would be so much easier for his communication. Like, he can put out like full sentences, but you could tell he's straining behind it. It's not natural for him. Like, he will go up to me and say, "Sebastian, can I have a hug, please?"
Aww.
You could tell that he had to force himself to say it. I would have, there have been times where he just shortens it to hug, and I'll hug him back. And I'd rather just try to make it as easy as possible for them. We got to start forcing them to adapt to the world and force the world to adapt to them.
Right. Exactly.
That is what we need to start doing.
Correct.
And if it takes a little bit of extra money to do so, or a little bit extra staffing, or a little bit of extra accommodations in the grocery store or the workplace, do it. Because at the end of the day, it'll be a worthy investment.
Correct. And for me, I am extremely sensitive as a part of my autism. I have anxiety as part of it. But however, I have a lot of empathy for other people who have gone through things that I've never even went through.
Exactly. And we're also different, but we need to adopt approaches that can be universally helpful to all of us, things that we would all benefit from equally. And of course, some models are different than others. There are parents from the National Council on Severe Autism who are trying to keep institutions in place. I think I'm against institutions, of course, but I think something like group homes, if the clients have autonomy, of course, they need to have autonomy at times for it to be good for them. And so I'm not against that. I think there needs to be better models. Like, there's over 1 million vacant homes in this country. So I think there could definitely be group homes made. It's just that the government's not funding it because they don't care. That's why parents and self-advocates together need to petition against the government and speak out, make their voices heard.
Oh, absolutely. I definitely agree.
Yeah,
I really
because
wish the government cared.
I know. We would be a lot stronger as a unit if we all came together. There's so many parents who tend to fight, and on the flip side, there are self advocates who tend to fight. And I think we need to find a little bit of common ground. I
Oh,
think
I
there are
agree.
some, yeah, I think there's some like those involved in Autism Speaks who are a little bit so far down the rabbit hole that it's very hard to get them to compromise. But there are those who can be reached, and those are the ones we need to start talking to first and collaborate with first.
Oh, I agree. I'm so glad that you brought this up. I'm glad you're bringing your experiences because your experiences really matter.
Thank you, and the same with
Hey, no
yours.
problem. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we should touch a little bit more on Autism Speaks because
Oh, yeah.
even in recent times they have been putting out like pro ABA videos. And oh, another new thing, the Autism Cafe. She hosts their main podcast with some other self advocate. I don't know his name, but some dude. And yeah, she. Do you know who she is?
Who?
The Autism Cafe.
I've never even heard of Autism Cafe.
Okay, so I don't want to say the real name just for reasons, but
Okay.
she is basically an autistic mother who has a
Mhm.
who's low support needs and has a high support needs autistic son. And
Right.
she, like the Moss family, puts the child out on display constantly, talking about his
Oh,
most private moments.
oh God.
Granted, she doesn't video the private moments, but she does talk about it in writing, which,
Mhm.
as I already said, if you make it anonymous and don't reveal the names, I could understand wanting to educate. But she's putting her child
Right.
out there. So now, in case he tries to find a job, now everybody's going to know. And what good is that for the child? Like, that's just
Exactly.
going to make their life miserable growing up. Even if they are intellectually disabled and have high support needs, they still deserve dignity.
Correct.
And she does a podcast and basically has people on her show, many of whom are against the neurodiversity movement, are very vocal against it.
Not good.
And like with Autism Speaks, you would think they would want to be a little more, I don't know, neutral, just because they're that big of an organization. To have such a stance, it really says a lot about them that they're willing to throw us under the bus. Because a lot of time on their social media, they will just not respond to critics, and they will, just try to have very neutral answers. But with that, it kind of shows their true colors. And
Correct.
did you ever know about the protests that happened? Like,
Oh,
it
yeah.
wasn't last year, it was the year before. It was an online protest against one of their walks, one of their virtual walks.
Yes.
And
Um, yeah. I also heard about Autistic Self Advocacy Network and how they would encourage a boycott of Autism Speaks. I actually support Autistic Self Advocacy Network for encouraging acceptance of neurodiversity and opportunities for them. I really accept them.
yeah, and the Fierce Autistics and Allies, they're the ones who led the protests that I'm referring to. And like it was pretty successful. Like a lot of people chipped in and commented, made their voices heard. And the husband of one of the board members, Lisa Goring, husband Paul Goring, personally messaged one of the organizers, and he said, "You got nothing better than to bash people who give a shit, cunt."
How immature of them.
I know. And yeah, they screenshotted him and blasted him all over social media and kind of making him look bad. And like, I don't know. I feel like the more we need to make our voices heard with them too, so they can
Oh,
show more and more
absolutely.
of their true colors.
Exactly. And I actually want to start a few protests against the exploitation of autistic children without consent. And I actually want to protest against people who do not care about funding group homes. And I just want to make sure the world's a better place, just like you want to make the world a better place.
Yes. Be careful with the group homes because we got to make sure that behaviorism does not seep into the
Correct.
group homes.
Good
Like there
point.
cannot be ABA connected to it. I think
Good
speech and
point.
occupational therapy,
Oh
absolutely,
yeah,
or even
absolutely.
the CERTS model, which is a combination of the two, and was founded by Dr. Barry Brazant, who's really good, and also Dr. Ross Green, his teachings, and Ukeru, all of those are excellent for group homes. But
Oh, I
take the
agree.
ABA out of it.
Oh, absolutely. I'm really glad you brought this point up. And I'm really glad that you are encouraging others to think of these circumstances. And I'm glad we're touching on so much problematic organizations. And I'm actually very thankful that we're doing this.
Yeah, I feel like we're talking about a lot of things others may not talk about. Of course, I'm not
Right.
trying to like take credit for things, but like I feel like more people need to speak up about it and maybe echo our
Correct.
viewpoints and expand on it because there's plenty of things we haven't mentioned that I think could use more attention.
Right. And, I also am thinking about doing a podcast dedicated to disability rights, intersectionality, equality, human trafficking, because human trafficking is a serious issue. And disabled people have a high chance of being victims of human trafficking. So I think it's very important to bring that up.
Oh yes, that's definitely an issue. It's not an issue I ever hear about. So good on you for exposing that.
So
And
basically, the barriers behind human trafficking are poverty, a lack of education, and these are some very important components and causes of human trafficking. And that is very important because, like I said, poverty and a limited education could prevent people from learning critical thinking skills, which will encourage them to take things literally. And that is when they lose all their rights and all their freedom. And I think it's very important to bring up human trafficking because it's so important.
absolutely. I think it would be good to touch on how all the things we talked about combined and where they all come from, because the Moss family, the BHARE Foundation, and Autism Speaks all share something similar in that they see the autism as the problem and not
Correct.
our society.
Correct.
They want the status quo to remain the way it is. And I think people, you can't change people, but a system you
Right.
can change. That is what we need to change is the system. And no
Correct.
matter how much force that may take, I think it is worth the effort because at the end of the day, disabilities are not the problem. We have always
They're not.
existed throughout time. There are even
Exactly.
fossils of human beings who were quote unquote disabled. And their society, their little tribes or whatever they were, took care of those people. And so those things can be done if there's evidence of it. And I think we need to go back to those days where we were taking care of our most vulnerable, because
I
the most
agree.
vulnerable people are the ones we need to take care of first, whether that's the disabled, the elderly, ethnic minorities, because of the discrimination they face, all those things, they need to be prioritized first and foremost.
And those who are struggling in poverty because they are have trouble making ends meet, and there are a lot of circumstances which could increase their chances of poverty, of course.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that falls into all the other identities we just mentioned. So yes, I think just the working class as a whole needs to be, you know, given better resources.
Oh, and absolutely. And you know how the healthcare system has a lot of flaws. Like for autistic people, they're less likely to access um, healthcare because professionals don't really know what to do with them, and that's one of the main reasons why it's hard for them to get healthcare.
Yeah, and that is in both healthcare systems, whether if it's like our for-profit healthcare system or the free healthcare system in the rest of the world, because it's very hard to come by care because it's a matter of hierarchy, like who's prioritized and who isn't, and that needs to be eliminated. More funding needs to be put towards just
Exactly.
healthcare in general.
Exactly. I also agree that we need to better fund our healthcare system because it's so expensive right now. and people have to pay so much money to get treatment, and that's not right. I see a lot of inequality in this world.
Oh, yes. You don't know the half of it. I'm glad that more and more people are starting to talk about it now because
Oh, I'm glad.
that's one blessing with social media is that we can bounce ideas off of each other in a way like never before. And so now more people are waking up to the injustices in our society and becoming more aware or woke, so to speak.
Yes. And because we're touching up on exploitation of disabled individuals, which is not talked about that much, especially fathering autism, I really hope that they don't get away with what they're doing, although they have so much money. But however, I'm not afraid of them. And no matter how much power and influence I have, I'm not backing down.
Same here. Because for the record, for any of the fans watching, we're Americans and we are protected under
Yes,
the First Amendment, which is
correct.
freedom of speech and freedom of
Yes,
assembly and freedom of religion.
yes,
So these things are, of course, our opinions, and we are
yeah.
entitled to those opinions. So for anyone who wants to criticize us, you know, give us what you got, but it's not just going
All
to make
right.
us stop.
No, it's not. And speaking of freedom of speech, fathering autism only supports freedom of speech unless, well, I'm going to take that back. Speaking of which, fathering autism favors freedom of speech as long as it favors their interests and their priorities and their beliefs. And they don't favor freedom of speech towards the opposition. Well, and mind you, when it comes to the opposition, they will block people who criticize them. They will say nasty comments and have the fans go after them. And honestly, I feel like they're not really for freedom of speech unless it favors them.
No, it's basically authoritarianism.
It is.
And there's so much evidence out there of their true
Oh,
colors
yeah.
and screenshots
So
of them
much.
messaging people back and stuff like that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I
And
think that's oh, go on.
like how Issa, that post where the Die Challenge podcast was had this post where Asa was messaging him and saying that how he was spreading hate, and that Asa said that, oh, don't you ever sit at the same table with us as if we're equals. I'm like, oh, what an arrogant piece of work. I'm like, you don't say that. Like, if I was as rich and influential as although I don't want to be rich that much, but if I were to be in their position, I would have treated everybody with respect. That's what I would have done.
I know. He thinks he's untouchable, like
He's
nobody is
he
better than
won't.
him.
Oh, he won't for long. Once people touch onto his situation and people start protests, which I'm actually going to encourage because more people need to make it hard for him to get away with it because they've gotten away for about 10 years since Abigail was 6 years old. 6 years old when she was barely talking and communicating.
I know. And just imagine that being 6, having no clue what's going on, and your parents just filming every day of your life,
Oh yeah,
every day. And yeah, it's like the Truman Show, but real. And you
I
have no
know.
control over it.
And even worse, like how Fathering Autism, they had the CPS video and they were in the pool ranting about how people were stupid and that they were like playing the victim. I'm like, okay, you two, Asa and Priscilla, you two are not the victims. Abby's the victim.
Yeah. There are people who act oppressed because they want attention. And
Yeah. And they act as
they
if everything is so hard and they're so privileged. Oh my gosh.
yeah, they have no idea what they have or how to be grateful because Abby is the reason they have what they have. The poor girl
Right.
is overworked and gets none of it in
Yes.
the end.
Oh, and you know that video where like there was this video about Abby having to get a job and yet Isaiah doesn't have a job? I feel like there's no equal treatment. If Abby has to have a job, then Isaiah should have a job because Isaiah is 20. He's in college. He should have as much experience.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, he's a whole other thing too. He's the golden child.
Yes. I do feel sympathy for him in a way because he seems like a very nice person, unlike Asa. and he seems like a really good kid and like he cares for Abby, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier to get him to listen than it would be for Asa or Priscilla, definitely. And especially more so than Summer too, because she's in with the parents. And
Yeah,
and yeah, he seems like he could be a pretty genuinely nice person. Like he went to
he
help kids in
does.
Africa and stuff.
Yeah,
I
he
think
seems like
that's
a
pretty
good
noble.
person. Like I have more sympathy for him than his parents.
Yeah, definitely. I do hope
Because
like
he
he
was a
gets to
kid
an what was that?
and he was a kid, so I can't really blame him for what
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah, and I do hope there comes a day where he can say to his parents, like, "Enough is enough. Why are you doing this to
Good.
Abby?"
Oh, I agree. And like I'm so disgusted to where I hope one day that Ace and Priscilla are brought to justice, even though they have so much money. But I really hope that by the time they find that Judgment Day is coming, they'll finally face justice. I really hope it'll happen. I just imagine, like, hey, imagine if I confront them in court and just, call them out.
Well, the greatest thing to stop a narcissist is to take away their admiration and ruin their reputation. And now,
Exactly.
granted, I will just throw out a note here. When I say that, I
Please.
am not talking about like people diagnosed with like cluster B personality disorders,
Correct.
people who are aware of their condition and who do what they can to make their lives better. Because I do have friends who are diagnosed with cluster B personalities, and they are very good people, but I'm talking about people who do not take accountability of their actions and keep
Oh,
hurting
yeah.
people and hurting people without
Oh, gosh.
acknowledging it, or they do know it, but they just keep continuing anyway and don't want to do better. Those are the people I'm referring to here.
And have you seen that recent video by the Dad Challenge podcast where Fathering Autism calls out Josh and says that he doesn't like exploitation when he's really doing it? So he's a hypocrite. So is Priscilla. I think that justice needs to be served one day. And I say this as a social work student. I really want social change to happen.
I think if they will do something bad. I think that will make bad karma catch them. I can just feel it. Something's going to happen that will completely destroy their reputation, just like the Stofers and what they did, and
Oh,
it'll
yeah.
all be over.
And like you got all these fans saying that, oh, like I'm being coached for speaking my mind, or I'm being called jealous or bully, hater, unkind, angry. Like I get called all these names and be told to get a life when I'm really calling them out for their BS. And I'm not going to let their intimidation bother me.
Like, don't be afraid, because what's the worst they're going
I'm
to do?
not. Well, the worst thing they'll ever do is criticize, and that's about it. But let them do it because, well, as much as I have the right to freedom of speech, they should also have the right to freedom of speech. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, be respectful then.
Absolutely, and all of it all is just an intimidation tactic more than anything.
Oh yeah. And I'm like, is it just me, or is Fathering Autism tampering with evidence and obstructing justice? I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to have some legal advice before I jump to that conclusion because my sense and my intuition tells me that they are doing this.
Yeah. Oh, we should mention while we're at it, Asa's illegitimate child.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there are a couple people who brought it up, and I was very concerned with the child. Um, I didn't know that he had an illegitimate child until I watched the Dad Challenge podcast, and I was actually very shocked. But before all this, I used to be a Fathering Autism fan because I thought it would be educate, and I wasn't educated on child exploitation until I ran across that Challenge podcast. Then I stopped supporting Fathering Autism altogether.
Yeah, it's pretty despicable. Basically, for
It
those who
is.
don't know, basically Asa, while married to Priscilla, from what I've heard, he went and got another woman pregnant,
Oh
and
God.
he has tried to never acknowledged that she exists and has refused to pay child support. And any of his business dealings that have to do with it, he put Priscilla's name.
Oh
So
yeah, that's not good.
yeah.
And when I was criticizing Fathering Autism, part of me was worried about going to jail because gosh knows they have so much influence. But I'm like, I don't think they'll arrest me, but we'll see what happens.
I don't think, well, First Amendment rights. I don't think you can be charged for expressing your opinion. So these are our opinions after all. And for those who want to look further into what may be facts, we have our other videos of our own. And
Yes.
also, you could just look at the Dad Challenge podcast, many other
You can
places.
look at
It's
Fathering
out there.
Autism blogs, and you can look at Fathering Autism blogs so that there is a lot of validity to the source. However, I would not encourage Tattle Life as a source because it's like a gossip page, so I wouldn't recommend gossip sites. I feel like it's like, oh, the he said, she said is not going to be that valid, so I'm not so sure. So I would say go to CC Suarez, Dad Challenge Podcast, Mindful Divergence, the Fathering Autism blog, so you can see the big picture and multiple documents suggesting that Fathering Autism is not what it seems, that they intimidate people. And, you know, if I were to be in court, I'd be able to present all the facts of the case if the videos were not private.
Yeah. And to the Dad Challenge podcast, we don't mean to bring any negative publicity to you. You are a wonderful
Yeah, we don't
ally
mean
to
it.
us.
You are amazing. And we're so sorry we wanted to like bring it up, but seriously, you keep up the great work. And we're bringing you up because we support you and CC Suarez Mindful Divergence. We also support you. So that's why we bring it up because you all of you are great allies.
Yes. And there's not a lot of them in terms of autistic people. We need to get more and more. Melissa Joan Hart, who played Sabrina the Teenage Witch, she's a good
Yes.
ally.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Amazing.
who, yeah, and the couple of the people who dropped out from the Next for Autism fundraiser that Mark Rober did. I forgot the people who dropped out, but there were a couple of YouTubers. Like they could also be used as potential allies for listening to
That's
us.
amazing. I'm so glad that they are. And sorry I had to bring up the Fathering Autism situation so much, but I'm so passionate about it because, like I said, it really hits me hard.
Yeah, same, because a lot of my advocacy focuses on people like Abby, the high support needs people, because I feel they don't get the recognition that the rest of us do. And
Yes.
we need to bring more attention to them and be upfront about the realities, but also acknowledge that they are full human beings the way they are and don't
Correct.
deserve to be changed. Of course, for
Correct.
the medical conditions that they may suffer from, yes, I do believe in treating those things. But let's face it, there are non autistic people who have those conditions too. So treating those things would also be treating everyone else with those conditions. And that would just be making the world easier for all of them.
Right. Is there anything you want to say? Are we good? Because I think we talked about almost everything.
Yeah, we pretty much did. Um, I think that was pretty much all. I do thank you for taking the time to collab with me, Erin.
Oh, no problem. I feel like you deserve a bigger platform. I believe that you deserve so much support, and we'll make sure we have so much allies to side with us. And I am grateful for this opportunity because I love to meet people, network with people, make connections, and just try to hear from other people. Because I mean, I value having a dialogue.
Definitely, we need to have more involved with our dialogue too. People who could contribute to our thoughts. So, if you want to reach out to either of us, and you're a YouTuber and autistic or an ally, definitely please feel free, and we'll try to set something up with you. Because it's been a long time and I finally returned to this. And so this is a pretty good way to keep us engaged and keep everybody
Yes.
else informed. So
Awesome. And yeah, we'll also provide our channel links so you can all subscribe to both of our channels. And so you can learn from us. And thank you for stopping by to watch us.
yes, thank you all. Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye.